Good evening and welcome to this year's first edition of Penn State Sports Night. I'm Ellie French.
And I'm Christian Kurapakis. The fourth-ranked Penn State Nittany Lions remain undefeated after escaping Kinnick Stadium on Saturday night with a 21-19 victory over the Iowa Hawkeyes. Heisman Trophy candidate Saquon Barkley led the charge with 211 rushing yards and 94 receiving yards for Penn State, who outgained Iowa 579 yards to 273. Despite Barkley's career game, however, Penn State nearly blew a game that may have decimated their postseason hopes. Iowa went up 19-15 with 1:42 remaining, but quarterback Trace McSorley marched Penn State 82 yards on 12 plays, ending it with a last-second connection with Juwan Johnson for the walk-off touchdown to come away with the victory. The Nittany Lions will return to Beaver Stadium for Week 5, where they will play host to Indiana at 3:30.
The Penn State women's volleyball team looked to bounce back against the Iowa Hawkeyes on Saturday afternoon, following an upset loss to Nebraska on Friday. And they did just that. The Nittany Lions took the match 3-1 in their second Big Ten matchup of the season. Senior Simone Lee led the way for Penn State with 22 kills, passing the 20-plus kill mark for the third time this season. She also registered her third double-double of the season with 10 digs in the match as the Nittany Lions improved to 11-1 overall and 1-1 in conference play.
That'll do it for us, but stay right here as we send it over to Brandon Pfeiffer and Dylan Huberman, who will be discussing the changes made in the NBA.
Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I am Brendan Pfeiffer, and we are fresh off of another exciting NBA offseason. And luckily for us, we have Dylan Huberman here to break it down for us. We're going to start out with the Carmelo Anthony trade. Biggest news of the weekend. Dylan, what do you make of that?
Well, look, it was a move that was expected for a long time. It was reported that Anthony had wanted out some time ago. Phil Jackson actually wanted to trade him before he was dismissed, and that's why he was dismissed. And then all of a sudden they decided to flip gears, trade him, and in return they received Enes Kanter, Doug McDermott, and a second-round pick. A league-shattering trade there, now that Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Russell Westbrook will share the same floor. Definitely
agree. Do you think the combination of Paul George, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo, they're all very ball-centric. Do you think they'll be able to gel and go at the Warriors, go at the Rockets and Spurs? It's a very competitive Western Conference now.
They will definitely contend. What I can tell you this is Russell Westbrook will be the floor general. It will be Westbrook running the show. Carmelo Anthony will be a spot-up shooter, and Paul George will have to work well without the ball in his hands. Russell Westbrook has shown that he knows how to distribute the ball, averaging a triple-double last season. He knows how to score. He knows how to rebound. He's going to be the guy. Nobody would expect anything less, and now he just has 2 extra All-Stars at his side.
Definitely agree with that. Let's transition over to the Eastern Conference. The Thunder aren't the only team that's made noise this offseason. How about the Boston Celtics? They went out, they got Gordon Hayward, they picked up Jason Tatum. What do you make of that?
Well, they are going to contend with the Cavaliers, I will tell you that. They were the #1 seed last year in the East. Granted, the Cavs did sit a couple of guys for a few games. They're there now. Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. That is one heck of a lineup that they have there. Will it beat Cleveland? We'll see. Depends on where Dwayne Wade goes, because he could still go to Cleveland and spice things up a heck of a lot. You never know. I can tell you this. I am going to pick them right now to go to the NBA Finals. I think that it's their time. I think there are too many weapons there. There's a lot of youth. And LeBron, I don't know if LeBron's going to be angry or not, but I can tell you Isaiah Thomas won't be there for a lot of the season. So we don't really know what that team's going to look like come postseason, whether or not they're going to have the right chemistry to go all the way.
Right. And let's stay in the Eastern Conference. Dwayne Wade just recently reached a buyout with the Chicago Bulls. Many teams are interested in him, including the Cavs, OKC, the Rockets, just to name a few. Where do you see him landing? I assume he'll be picked up later this week. Teams are hungry for him and his veteran savviness. What do you think?
I think that the 2 destinations, not 3, Miami Heat are not going to be in this to me. The 2 destinations are Cleveland and Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City has made a lot of noise lately, obviously, considering Carmelo Anthony's acquisition and Paul George's acquisition. I think he would fit there perfectly. A starting 5 of Westbrook, Dwayne Wade, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, and Steven Adams is very hard to ignore. That would contend with the Warriors if you ask me. That's one heck of a lineup. In Cleveland, a veteran presence to come in at shooting guard and relieve J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert of that extra time, and Kyle Korver there of that extra time, will mean the world to this team. They got there last year. It could also push them over the threshold. Wherever Dwayne Wade goes, the Warriors are going to be the sole team to have problems with it, because he will not be going to Golden State. He will play against Golden State, and he may help the team beat Golden State. He is going to be a huge factor this season, no matter where he ends up.
Can't disagree with that. And like we said earlier, it's a very exciting NBA offseason. Winners, losers, how do you feel about the whole thing in general?
I'll tell you right now, the Chicago Bulls, man, they lost. They lost big time. They are not going to be contending until I have my graduate certificate from Penn State, or maybe even somewhere else. We don't even know. They are not going to go anywhere anytime soon. Mark my words. They have nothing going for them. They got a couple of draft picks back. Lauri Markkanen is all they have to boast. If Lauri Markkanen, Zach LaVine, they're going to be your star players. Zach LaVine's coming off a torn ACL. I'm sorry, you're going to rely on your two scorers, Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine. One was a bench player. The other one tore his ACL. I just don't see how they're going to be able to score much.
Right.
Robin Lopez in the middle, fine. Lauri Markkanen down low, whatever. You're going to look around the Eastern Conference, they're not going to be contending. Winners, Oklahoma City, obviously. They built themselves a super team. They are in the top 5. I'm going to also throw the Minnesota Timberwolves out there. The acquisition of Jimmy Butler, the acquisition of Jeff Teague, 2 big pickups there. They're both going to be instant starters, and they may finish top 5 in the Western Conference, which they were nowhere near last season.
That's right. All right, that's going to do it from us. I'm Brendan Pfeiffer, Dylan Huberman. We're going to send it down to Ellie French and Jack Hirsch to talk some Penn State football.
Welcome back to Penn State Sports Night. I'm Ellie French, joined by our Penn State football insider, Jack Hirsch, to discuss the Nittany Lions season so far and what to look ahead to in the coming weeks. So Penn State remained 4th in the latest AP poll after a nail-biting victory against Iowa and will host Indiana this Saturday at home. The Nittany Lions entering 4-0 for this matchup. But before we discuss what to expect in Saturday's game against the Hoosiers, let's talk about what happened in Iowa City. So first, let's focus on the offensive side of things for Penn State. Penn State really struggling to execute in the red zone in that game, despite having nearly 600 yards of total offense. So why did they struggle, Jack, you think, against a team that many thought they were going to do so well against?
Well, so Trace McSorley really didn't have that good of a game until that final drive where he accounted for 68 yards of his 284 passing on the day. But that doesn't really tell his whole story. He was 31 of 48, yeah, but he was barely above 50% at halftime. And this was like the 3rd straight game where he didn't look sharp. He didn't look sharp at Pitt. And despite a 300-yard passing day against Georgia State, he really didn't look that great just because Georgia State's defense was not that great as well. So, it wasn't all his fault. His offensive line was a mess. Brandon Mann came back from injury, and that gave him a little bit of a boost, but it really wasn't the same. And then Andrew Nelson was horrible. Chaz Wright never even played. They've been sharing the duties at right tackle, but he didn't really play, and Will Fries came in for the second half and filled in for him. But that's something Penn State's got to take care of, is their offensive line. That's something that they've really struggled with in the last couple years, especially under James Franklin, having to deal with the scholarship reduction as a result of the sanctions. But this was the year we thought they were going to actually have a solid offensive line, and it looked like they did at the first game, but right now it's a mess.
I agree. Definitely a lot of offensive line struggles so far for the Nittany Lions. But to flip things now to the other side of things, defense been really strong so far this season from the Nittany Lions, and in the Iowa game continued that success that they were showing on the defensive side of things in those previous 3 games. With the exception of that touchdown set up by Trace McSorley with the turnover for Iowa, setting up that touchdown for Iowa, and a couple of big second half Akram Whaley plays, the defense looked pretty solid aside from those things. So how was the defense able to keep Penn State in the game?
Well, first of all, they've had this deep rotation at defensive end, and it's been really successful, but unfortunately they lost Torrance Brown, one of their starters, for the year, it looks like, as ESPN's Chris Fowler reported right before the game. So Sharif Miller, the other starter, decided to wear Torrance Brown's number, and he had himself a day. He had a couple of sacks, and he's been playing really well all season. Ryan Buckholz started in Torrance Brown's stead, and he did a successful job. And they've also got some freshmen, Shakatoni, Shane Simmons, who could play really good. And James Franklin's been really high on kid number 99, Itor Gross-Matos. Really good player. It looks like he's...
Itor Gross-Matos. That's
Yeah.
a mouthful.
Yeah,
That's a mouthful.
absolutely.
Say that 10 times fast.
Itor Gross-Matos looks like he's going to be a future at defensive end for this team. So he's looking pretty good. And, you know, one of the things that was really forgotten from the game, Troy Apke had a field goal block, and a lot of people aren't really talking about it just because of how good Saquon Barkley was, how good the defense was, and that last-second touchdown. But that was one of the key plays of the game, and it kept it from being 2008 all over again for the Nittany Lions. So what else happened was Marcus Allen played really well, had another safety as he did 2
Doing a lot of
weeks
great
ago.
things this season.
Yeah, he's playing really well. So this defense looked pretty good in its first real test against a top team in the Big Ten.
Absolutely. So defense really showing up for that game. And someone else who's showing up for that game, who has been all season, everyone talk of the town, Saquon Barkley. But with this game, 358 total all-purpose yards, breaking a school record. Like I said, talk around town, the Heisman favorite of this season. Is Barkley going to be able to continue it on? Like, should we expect this level of production to carry on for him throughout the season?
So he had 40 touches against Iowa. That's a lot. I don't care how athletic he is. I don't care how big his legs are. I don't care how strong he is. I don't care what kind of numbers he's putting up in the weight room. It's going to be tough for him to replicate that production for the entire season. So I think we need to temper our expectations. I think the over-under I like to put is 200 yards total offense, so that's rushing and receiving yards. But I think, he's the favorite for the Heisman. He's my favorite. He's probably your favorite, you'll say after the game, and he's a lot of other people's favorite too. So
Yeah.
I think he's the leader of this offense.
Absolutely. And flipping the script a little bit, final seconds of the game, everyone's biting their nails at home, clock's ticking, stadium's rocking. McSwirly throws the ball, finds Juwan Johnson for the touchdown to win the game. Juwan Johnson, not a name that we've heard a lot from so far this season, not your Deshaun Hamilton, your Mike Gesicki. What is the future looking like this season for Juwan Johnson? Is he potentially the next Chris Godwin for Penn State?
So, yeah, he's the guy who's starting Chris Godwin's receiver position this year. He was kind of the darling of Penn State's spring practices, if you will. Everyone talked about him as having the best spring. And he opened things up against Akron with 84 yards, pretty good game, led the team in receiving. Had a couple down games in the past 2 weeks, but this week he really showed up with 7 catches for 92 yards and that game-winning touchdown. So 6'4", 220, I think he's going to be one of those guys that Trace McSorley can just throw the ball up and he's going to go get it.
Transitioning from the Iowa game to this Saturday's game at home, Penn State taking on Indiana, 3:30 game for that. What are we expecting to see from the Nittany Lions in this matchup at home?
This is the first time Penn State's going to get a quarterback who can actually play. Richard Legal tore apart Ohio State's defense in the first week of the season with 410 yards, and this is a test for them. They passed their first test against Iowa. Now let's see if they can pass this one. So I think it's going to be an interesting game to watch, and it'll tell us a lot more about the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Absolutely. And what do we need to be aware of in regards to this Iowa team? What are they going to bring to the table in this matchup?
Well, it's a Big Ten team, so Big Ten football just like last week.
And that'll do it for this week's edition of Penn State Sports Night. We'll see you guys next week.